Let's send it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show this week. I'm joined by a good friend of mine that I've learned a ton from, even before I've had a chance to meet him. And I continue to learn from him every day that we chat or when we're together at an event. And that is none other than co-owner of Tethrd. We have Greg Godfrey. Greg, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, it's always fun to catch up with an old pal, and especially here right before hunting season as we record this in early July. I got family vacation coming up next week, and then as soon as I get back from that, it's like tractor beam focus on the hunting season. So I'm excited. This is like the best time of year, July and August, when I'm, well, not the best, but getting ready for the hunting season, and kind of planning everything and getting details and like buying new gear and getting stuff. I just love it. It's the best.
I'm with you on that. Usually once the 4th of July ends for me, that's when things kick up that next bar, right? That's when I get a little bit more giddy. So I guess when, like you said, after that vacation, a little bit sprinkled now, a little bit, it seems like. So like you said, this is one of my favorite time. I feel like in the years past, the last month and a half up until right now, I used to buy so many different pieces of equipment that I thought I would need or would like or I want to try, and then the next thing you know, I'm either flipping it or keeping it. That was like the whole gear side of things.
Yeah, it's
the end with that.
I'm the same way. I used to buy and sell so much gear. I don't do it anymore. I find myself turning into a bit of a hoarder. I just have all kind of stuff that I don't even use anymore, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So to kind of kick things off, Greg, I want you to think about a memory or an instance that maybe you think back on a lot that kind of help you get to where you are today. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the hunting world. It could be in the business world. It could be in your former military world. Like, what's a moment or a memory that kind of really shaped you where you are today?
That's a great question, and an interesting way to start off a hunting podcast. Man, I think effort. I think about effort a lot, and in a lot of books that I've read and conversations that I've had and relationships with mentors who have helped guide me through the years. I'm 42 years old, so not an old guy, but I'm not a young guy. I'm right there in the middle, right, where I've learned a little bit about life and made a lot of mistakes and gotten a lot smarter and a lot wiser, but I'm also not done, either, kind of thing. So I think a lot about effort, and man, it's like the one thing you can control. There are so many things that you just can't control. Like, we think about like starting a business or shooting a big deer. There's so much that you can't control. You can't control the wind. You can't control the weather. You can't control the food, the acorn crop. You can't control the hunting pressure unless you own all your ground. And even then, you got to worry about poachers. But like there's so much you can't control. But you can control the amount of effort you're willing to put in. And I have found in my life that no matter what it is, if it's being a hunter or a good dad or building a business, that if it all revolves around effort. And the harder you work at something and the more you care about it, the more effort you put into it, it's just, you're bound to succeed in whatever success looks like for you. You can get there if you just bust your ass and put in a lot of effort. So no, I don't know if that's necessarily a memory, but I think about that a lot, and it's something that it comes back to me over and over and over again, and it's almost like a mantra that I kind of have in my life. Like, you know what, I'm not the best looking guy, I'm not the smartest guy, I'm not the most talented guy, but I can outwork a lot of people. So I think effort is a big deal. It means a lot to me. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That is one aspect that I think as a teacher that I really push and harp on with a lot of my students, especially my seniors. I've talked about it before on the podcast, where when it ends when the season or the year wraps up with them as a senior group, I teach a personal training fitness class, and they're only seniors. They take like these pre-rec courses throughout their 4 years where I teach, and then myself and two other professors or teachers teach kind of like the same course. They have one, her name's Dr. Reed. She teaches basically the main content side of things. They have her all year. Phenomenal individual, great teacher as well. And then they go to another colleague of mine, and he teaches them the they get a health credit, but it's the nutrition side of things. And then they come to me for the inside the gym, in the weight room, and I kind of go over personal training skills, proper technique, all that type of stuff. And every end of the year, I give them the life speech. Like I take off my teacher cap and I put on like the dad hat, also the teacher, the coach, the human being who's made a ton of mistakes, learn from them, and kind of send that same message home to them. Like what you put into life is what you'll get. You're going to make hundreds of mistakes, and that is okay. Like the one aspect that I always tell them, the walls around you are going to feel like they are closing in like none other, but no, every dark night, there's a bright day after that. No matter what, that sun's coming up. So to kind of push forth that effort, and kind of like you, Greg, grew up, parents divorced, like my parents were divorced. I live with my grandparents. A lot of things were kind of against me, quote unquote, I guess you could say, because of my upbringing. But at the same time, I had sports. I tried hard. I put in a lot of effort. Same thing with what I do now as a teacher, as running Antler Up Outdoors and the podcast and my hunting, and, even working for you. That's the one aspect that I work my tail off and try to give you the best of me as well. So I appreciate that. I love that you said effort, and I do believe no matter what you put in, and the more as the hunting side of things go, the more individuals that I talk to that put in a lot of time and effort, not necessarily always the effort putting boots on the ground, that is one of the skills, but getting out there and putting a lot of effort into it, those individuals really reap those rewards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's talent matters, and if you have talent, you got a leg up on the competition. But even if you're not the most talented individual like me, just some idiot, but if you're willing to work hard and learn, you can do what you want to do, no matter what it is.
Yep.
Chasing big bucks, or like you said, doing all the other stuff that makes a well-rounded human being. I mean, it all revolves around effort and attitude. So remember that, listeners. Yep. As you're chasing the booner this year, bust your butt, keep a good attitude, and even if you don't get them, you'll be a better hunter for it.
No, I've learned more in the hunting woods from failure than probably success.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
No doubt about it.
I think that's fair. Those are the hard lessons, but they seem to be the ones that stick with you.
Yep, no doubt about it. So what we just talked about earlier on, right now we're in July. It is that fun time. We're chipping away. Like, you don't want summer to end because of the weather and how nice it is, but it's so close to that deer season. Anytime I go on a run and I see deer or a drive, I always say I have that like weird X-ray vision where I'm like deer and it's like 700 yards away. My wife, just is like, I don't know how you see all that stuff. Things start to get a little bit more fun and closing in on the hunting season. So with that, Greg, what are you doing now to prepare for this upcoming season, or are you about to do, if that makes sense?
So right now it's all about prep for travel. So I'm a little different because I have a job, a full-time gig in the hunting industry, and a lot of what I do, a lot of my job revolves around creating content for hunting. So it's not really fair for me to be like, what am I doing? Because my world is a little different now than it used to be. But I mean, right now, pre-Tethrd, I would have been planning my one big trip that I got to do. When I was in the Army and I was active duty, or even before that, I basically got one hunting trip per year, more or less, because that was about all the time I could get off that I didn't have to commit to family. So My
Right.
wife, typically I got one trip. So me and my brother or me and my dad or whoever, we'd be planning that one thing. Where are we going? We're going to Indiana and we're going to stay with a buddy and we're going to hunt his farm, or we're going to Illinois and me and Bobby, we're going to go rent a hotel or an Airbnb or sleep in our truck or whatever it is. It was all about getting to know that area. So forums, making phone calls to wildlife biologists, doing pre-scouting with Onyx, to kind of plan where I'm going and do that stuff. That's the stuff and getting my gear kind of all lined out. Now, fast forward 20 years, and I pretty much know how to do all that stuff, and I'm I guess at this point I'm an expert. I've done it so much, and I've been to so many states, and I've hunted so many different places that I pretty much can do it blindfolded at this point. So now I focus more this time of year, kind of, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. It's more work for me now. Now it's more about planning for all the people that I am responsible for and the content and all that stuff. That's really, and then I get to tag along. So, like,
Yeah.
for instance, we're doing some stuff in North Dakota this year for the kickoff. So I do kind of handle a lot of the planning and stuff for that. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just show up and hunt.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for me in that regard. And, not to sound like a jerk, but now I've got access to gear and stuff like that. So I don't really have to worry about that stuff anymore. I know, sorry. I know. It is what it is. But
Hey, when you work hard and put in that effort, good things happen.
yeah, and then it's like you get, one of our partners at Tethrd is Vortex, and they're, a great partner. But I don't have to worry about glass anymore because Vortex they're so awesome. They're like, what do you need, Greg? And I'm like, oh, I need this. And they're like, okay, they send it to me. So it's really cool. But, that took a lot of work to get there. But yeah, so point is I don't focus a lot on myself anymore for hunting. I really focus on our team and what we're doing, and then I just kind of insert myself. I cherry pick the best spots, and I do that. So, man, everybody's gonna hate me after this because I'm going to North Dakota, I'm going to Illinois in October, I'm going to back to North Dakota for rifle season, and then I'm going on another trip somewhere in the Midwest. I don't know where,
Nice.
for the first part of November. So I've got four big whitetail hunts planned this year. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
I like that, Greg. Now,
What about you? What are you planning this fall?
so this fall will be obviously Pennsylvania. I have Ohio, which is where I'll be. Actually, when this episode drops, I'll be getting ready right for that trip. So I'll be going out a couple days ago, put some cameras, get some boots on the ground, that type of stuff. I'm going close to an area where I killed that turkey here, in Ohio. So kind of got a little bit of the ground underneath me a little bit, but I was not necessarily focused on whitetail at that point in time. So I'll be going to Ohio for sure. I know Bobby and I are still planning on doing that early November hunt together. So maybe we'll be in that same region together during that time frame. So that I think we're still planning Missouri. So for that beginning of November. So that's where I plan on hopefully kind of taking things. And if I am successful early in PA, maybe during gun season, New York, it will be an option, which would be pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, I really miss that part about hunting season. Yeah, that's one of the downsides about getting being a full-time guy in the outdoor world. It's there's pros and cons to everything, right?
Yep.
There's good and bad. The pro is you get to think about what you're passionate about 365 days a year and turn that into a way you make a living. But then the flip side of that is it turns it into you got to make a living. So with the hunting season, that sounds great that I get to focus on hunting all the time. But in reality, it kind of screws me up a little bit because I don't get to just get excited about it like I used to as much, because it turns into work. But the flip side is, like turkey season, we're not a turkey company, so when it's turkey season, I can just be Greg and focus on turkey. So that has turned into something that I really enjoy. Like last year I went on 2 trips with my brother. We went to Missouri, and then we went and one with my brother, one with my dad. And my dad and I went to shot an Osceola down near Lake Okeechobee in Florida, and then me and Bobby went and shot an Eastern in Missouri. And those were just no filming, no. Well, we did film, but it was all like self-film stuff. You
Yeah.
know, it's not like content. I'm not bringing camera guy. Like, it was easy. And man, that is the best. One day I will get back to that in the deer hunting world, where I can just focus on planning my 1 or 2 trips a year and just go with all my buddies and do it that way. Because you do lose that. Well, I guess I should speak for myself. I have lost that a little bit in that fun aspect of it. When you turn it into a gig, you lose a little bit of that, and it's so it's not all rainbows and unicorns when you work in the hunting industry 24/7. But at the same time, it still beats sitting in a cubicle writing mortgages or something.
Yeah. Well, I have to go back. I have to rebuttal you a little bit, and that is not with Tethrd being a turkey company, which I agree. But man, this thing right behind me, right here, that sucker, man, I love it, dude. I mean, I know there's so much more we could use it for other than turkey season. So I get it. To me, it's like a Swiss Army knife for hunting, scouting, fishing, turkey hunting, you name it. So I get what you're saying. But as far as I used to be a big turkey vest guy, and then I got away from it. How could I be the minimalist as possible? But this year, it combined that turkey vest and feeling minimalist as possible in one, because I said it in some of the video clips that you really don't, unless you have it really packed down, you didn't really notice it on you. So it wasn't like cumbersome, like, man, this vest, this is whatever. It was, I mean, Carl crushes everything that Carl does. But at the same time, that thing is pretty freaking slick.
I agree. It's a home run. You totally forget that it's there. The way Carl designed it, and the boys over at THP had a lot of input into how this thing worked. So between the guys at Tethrd that understand ultralight gear manufacturing, and then THP with their turkey chops and the way that they know what matters to a turkey hunter, man, I really feel like it's a home run. I love that vest. I used it all over the country for 2 seasons. The prototype 2 seasons ago, and then the production version this year. And I'm with you. It's awesome. There's 1,000 ways you can do it. The Swiss Army knife is a great analogy, because it truly can do. I mean, from shed season, you got the bird bag, which doubles great as a dump pack for sheds, and then water. It just does everything. It really does. So I'm excited to try it out this year, deer hunting, and see how it goes for some stuff. Like, I've got a couple of things planned where I might be doing some ground attack stuff. Yep. And I think it's going to be a home run for stuff like that. So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, the M2 is pretty awesome.
I like that. Now we'll kind of, okay, there was my squirrel moment. That's where I just go total squirrel. So we were talking about what you're doing now, and in the month of the summer months, July, and you've been doing it for a long time, like you mentioned. And I remember going back, watching your G2 videos, and just seeing some of the things that you were doing to prep your gear and your truck and all that stuff. Like, when I seriously say I learned a lot from you prior to meeting you and collaborating and doing things for you, I truly mean that. And I know you provided also like a newer article written on Tethrd Nation on the blog for, you're hunting multiple states, or you're hunting going out of state. Like, here's some things. And I know you created like a checklist, which I find very helpful, because that's how my brain works. And obviously that's how your brain works as well. What are maybe some other little overlooked tasks that hunters seem to forget when they're doing this? Like, I mean, you could go, what do you think basically with that? So an overlooked task that hunters seem to forget when they're planning these trips or getting ready to go?
There's a couple that come to mind. I have an awesome checklist that I have been using for 5 seasons now. And when you look at it, it's a Google spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet essentially. And I just every new hunt, I just I have a base tab, the very first tab when you open it up is kind of everything, all my gear. And then for each one, I just duplicate that tab, make a new tab, and then delete out the stuff that I want and rename it. So like this year, I will make a new tab for North Dakota, and it'll say North Dakota 2023, and it's all right there. So, but a couple of things that I've learned, kind of things that a lot of people wouldn't think about. I learned this on an elk hunt in Colorado. Always have extra stuff that you just leave in your truck. So I have a whole tab that's literally labeled, or a whole column that's literally labeled "Leave in truck," and it's stuff like changes of clothes, cash, extra life ice chests. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me, but there's 4 or 5 things that is like leave in your truck. That's just for emergency cases. This would be like a backpack hunt or somewhere where you're away from the truck, something like that. For whitetail, one of the things that I added to my checklist was to find a taxidermist. Because, laws have changed in the last 10 years, and you can't transport, if you kill a gagger, you're not able to transport that stuff legally over a lot of state lines because of CWD and whatnot. So part of my checklist is every area that I go to, I find a local taxidermist that I can leave my stuff with, or at least put it in a freezer until I figure out, what the next step is. Because, you can always skull cap it and leave the skull and the spine and everything in that state, and then you're able to transport it. But if I don't want to skull cap it, if I want to take, maybe I'm in a situation where I don't feel like it's a really big buck and I don't feel comfortable, caping it out. For whatever reason, I want to take the whole head. So that's part of the checklist. Part of the things that goes on my checklist is to find a local taxidermist and then at least make a call and explain what I'm going on and be like, dude, if I get one down, do you have a freezer, kind of thing like that.
That's actually a really great tip, and something that I'm sure a lot of people either already, are doing, but also maybe overlook. So that is a great tip. And Greg, I appreciate you sharing that one. Now, when we're talking about, now a lot has changed over the years as far as your setup and everything like that, especially when traveling. I remember seeing some of the posts last year, how sometimes you guys had like a little minivan as you're going into a couple of spots, like in Nebraska and stuff like that. What does that camp life now look like for you? It really, has anything changed, or is it still like whatever is available for me to camp or stay somewhere? That's what I'll be doing.
Yeah, it's whatever. So I've done it all, man. I've stayed at friends' houses. I've rented cabins. I've stayed in tents. I've slept in my truck. It just kind of depends on what the world throws at you. So like this year, let's just talk about this year. So this year I'll go to North Dakota and I'll sleep out of my truck or a tent. I'll probably have both. I built a whole sweet little DIY rig for the back of my truck that I slept in many, many nights, and I'll either sleep in that in North Dakota, or I'll bring a couple of tents and sleep at a campground. Then when I go on a rifle hunt in North Dakota, we rented a house. Yep. I'm not sleeping in North Dakota outside. It'll be like 0 degrees. Literally be 0. Like the last time I hunted in rifle season in North Dakota, it was 0 and there was 1.5 foot snow on the ground. So now I got a house for that. Then when me and a bunch of buddies go to Kentucky, we've been going for the past 3 or 4 years. We do a big Airbnb and we all sleep on couches. I bring an air mattress because I'm usually the last one there, so all the beds get taken. So I bring an air mattress and throw it in the wherever I can find room. So you just do what you do, 2 years ago, I went to Kansas, public land Kansas hunt, and I hunted near this lake. So we rented a little cabin that was on the lake, and I brought my boat so I could hunt by boat. Yeah. You just do whatever you got to do. I mean, a lot of times it's dictated by finances, and sleep in your truck, man. I think I did a DIY video on my G2 Outdoors YouTube channel. I think it cost me like $150 to build a camper setup in the back. Yep. And it's awesome. Like, it's totally awesome. You can always find friends. The biggest buck that I ever killed in my life was in Indiana, and I just crashed on a buddy's couch. So there's there's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, it's just whatever your checkbook allows, really. And then also how the hunt works. I mean, sometimes you got to cover a lot of miles, and so it would make way more sense to sleep in your truck. Sometimes you got a ton of property that's really close to a central campground, and so it makes sense to kind of home base and go out from there. It just depends. Like Carl and Caden, they went on a turkey hunt this spring, and they were hunting really spread out properties. So they just slept in their truck. Like they'd check this property this day and then drive to the next spot and sleep, and then, just kind of move, which that makes a ton of sense. I've never done it that way. I've always done the home base. Even if I was sleeping in my truck, I would come back to the campground. But that's a great way to do it too. And you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can do it for essentially free,
Right. What has been, when you think back to all your out-of-state hunts, what state or which hunt seems to be like one that you just love? Like that is like such a favorite hunt of yours?
It definitely revolves around people. I mean, I've been in camps where I didn't loose an arrow and they were awesome. And then I've been in camps where, like you don't really, they're not your people. Like maybe you're a guest or something, or you're going with other folks and you don't really know them. And that was, kind of okay. But then the best camps that I've been a part of have nothing to do with the lodging. They have nothing to do with whether or not I killed a booner or not, because I've never killed a booner, ever. But it has more to do with the people. And when you're in camp with like-minded fellas and the food's good and, the weather cooperates, those tend to be the best camps. Even when, like I said, you don't kill anything. Man, when the temperatures are right and it's cold and it feels like deer and everybody's, talking shit back and forth one another at night, that's the best. That's what it's all about. And there's been several camps now. I've been lucky to be in several camps like that. And it seems like nowadays more and more I get to do that, once or twice a year, which is just awesome. So I don't know. Some guys are different. Some guys like to be on their own, and it's more up to them. It's more about the kill. They're like really honed in on killing a big mature deer, which is totally fine. I found for me that over the years that has become less important to me, but there was a time in my life where it was. There was a time in my life where I wouldn't go in camp with other people. Like me and my brother, we would go somewhere and our purpose was killing a big deer. Now, we didn't always do that, but that's what we really cared about. I've kind of changed. I guess maybe I've gotten soft as I've gotten older, and I don't care as much about that anymore. Like, I want to kill a big deer, but I'd really rather just be in camp with people I enjoy hanging out with and have fun. That's it's gotten more about that to me. So
now, that's a great answer. What's so funny is yesterday I went on this run, and as I was running through this trail near back by my house, as I was coming up the one little hill, I could see in the timber this doe, and I'm like, man, she's just staring at me. Like, when's she gonna go? And as I'm getting closer and closer, and she did not move, and I got like maybe seven yards from her as I pass her, and she just stayed there staring at me. And the reason why I'm telling you this is as I'm running, I'm thinking about this conversation and how the direction I want it to go. And I started thinking about that specific question that I asked you. And it's remarkable that you said that, because the same thing for you. I have some hunts coming up. Like I mentioned, I'm going on the scouting trip here to Ohio with two good friends of mine. One of them I went to Utah with a couple years ago. The other one I did a early season hunt in Delaware with. And I just think back to those memories. I didn't kill anything. One of them I drew back on a mule deer. I did not release the arrow, but just being in those presents and in camp and everything like that, that's what I was thinking about too. And it's funny, you were like, am I getting soft? And man, it's about those relationships, right? Those memories you're creating, and one of them comes to mind that you mentioned, and you said earlier you're going to be doing it again this year. Is that North Dakota? I remember, Greg, watching that. You killed a great buck. Carl killed one with his trad bow. I remember watching those couple videos and being so, like, in a positive way, jealous of that, because of just seeing how awesome that camp really was with the people in there. I'm like, man, I want to experience that. Not like the hunting thing. It wasn't even about the hunt. It was like just the experience of that camp, of how bad I wanted to be a part of that, in the sense of, like, with friends and good people, and just, you could see how much fun you guys really had. And then once I had a chance to get to know you guys and work events, and I would bring that up and talk to you, and it just, like, solidified just how much fun that stuff is. And it's like, man, that's good stuff.
Can you go with me this year?
I would. I would.
It's right in the middle of school season. It's in September, but you've got an invite. If you want to go, you can go with me again. We're going to a different place, but you're welcome to join us, man. It'd be fun. Now, that specific camp. So listen to this. That was me, Carl, Jared, the Ginger Ninja, who is a killer, who works at Tethrd. We had Garrett Prawl, the DIY sportsman, was there. We had Shane Simpson, who is a killer, and we had Troy, the ranch fairy. Him and his son drove up from Texas to join us on that hunt, and then there was some other guys there that just made that camp so much fun. And we were sleeping in our trucks, and we had at a campground, but we slept in our trucks or tents or whatever, and the weather was great. The people were great. I killed a great buck. I mean, it was super, super fun. That is a very, very fun memory of a camp. That goes up there at the top of the list, honestly. That was a fun camp. There's a funny story there. I was asleep in my truck. It was like 11:30 at night, midnight or so, and this dude with, like, a big 40-foot, like a bus, travel trailer bus, he pulls into the campsite next to us, and he woke up our whole camp. They were being loud, and it was just, I get it. You get there late, you were driving all day, you get there late, you get to camp when you get to camp, like, I get it. But they were being really loud, and, like, they weren't being very respectful to the other people in the campground. And I'm asleep in my truck, like, right next to where he pulled up. I'm talking like 10 feet. Like, my truck's parked in the spot here, and he's like the next guy. He's right there. And so we all kind of woke up, and a couple of guys were out of the tent, like Jared and Carl, I think, were out of their tents and whatever. And there was a picnic table right behind my truck. So I had, like, backed into my truck, and the picnic table was, like a big concrete picnic table that you can't move. It's there. And so some of my stuff, had, like, my gear and whatnot, was on the picnic table, and, whatever. Well, I guess that was their picnic table. It's really hard to know, because the parking spot for my campsite that I had paid for was literally right directly in front of it, right? Yeah, so, like, if you put my tailgate down, like, that was the picnic table. It was right there in the same line. So I guess that was their picnic table. We didn't know that. There's like 100 picnic tables. It's like, big deal, right? Use the one on the other side of your camper. Who cares? Well, this dude gets out. It's like midnight. I'm asleep. He's waking everybody up. And then he starts bitching about the picnic table. He's like, this guy's he's like being really loud, complaining to his wife, like, these took over our picnic table. So he kept going on. Finally, I get out, and I'm pissed at this point. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? It's midnight. Are you going to have a picnic? Like, what does it matter? We'll clean it in the morning. Like, big deal. Like, we almost came to blows. I was pissed. I typically don't lose my temper, but I was very angry that night. Yeah. And we exchanged some words. I may or may not have said some things that I probably shouldn't have said. And I think Carl had to step in and get in between. I'm not a very angry guy typically, but that dude, he pissed me off, and I was ready to go to blows with him. Anyway, but those kind of things make a great hunting camp. I mean, if you almost get in a fight, I can pretty much guarantee you it's going to be a good hunting camp.
Yep. There's a long story short, a good friend of mine, he was telling me of a hunting camp that he was in, and my buddy, he takes no shit from anyone, and he does his own thing, which is phenomenal. He's a great human being, a wonderful friend. He talks about a story where at a camp that he had somebody sniffing around like at night, and like somebody was like, "Yo, there's somebody out here." Well, he grabs like a gun just to see like, "Hey, you're on our property," basically. Here it was like almost like a game commission, but he was off the clock and he was just like seeing what they were doing or something along those lines. It's just, yeah. And they got into it pretty well. And the guy basically apologized and, he was in the wrong and all this other stuff. But yeah, some pretty funny things could go down at a hunting camp.
Some people are just jerks, man. They just don't.
Yeah.
Some people just, they think they're the main character in the story and everybody else is supporting cast. And you just have to remember that you're not the main character. There are other people out there. And, that guy, he could have handled that situation completely. First of all, there's no need to bitch about a picnic table literally at midnight. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to break out peanut butter and jelly and have a picnic at night? Like, you're not doing it. So, why cause a fight? Just wait till the morning. Like, it wasn't a big deal. And then coming in, being all rude and shining your lights and being loud, and it's just obnoxious and unnecessary. Just be respectful.
I know. So here's a question: when you get to these hunts, maybe you've had the opportunity, like North Dakota. Yes, you've been there in years past, but now this is going to be a new spot that you're going to. Maybe you have some prior knowledge from friends or whatever like that. When you get to a spot new, totally out of your obviously you've maybe looked on OnX and you looked at on the map of e-scouting and everything like that. But what are maybe some things that you are really keen on taking precaution or aggressive with? Like, meaning your entry route, your exit route, like, do you go full bore just because you're only here for a certain amount of time and don't necessarily care? Because, hey, if I'm going to make it happen, I have to find the sign, the location of the deer, all that stuff. Like, anything like that you really pay attention to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do get really aggressive on these out-of-state hunts. Every now and again, if you get lucky, you can bide your time on a short out-of-state, call it a 1 week hunt, because that's what most guys get. They get their rutcation for a week in November, and that's what most guys get to do. Sometimes you get lucky and you can find a spot, that needs a west wind, and you get a west wind, on day 2 or something. But normally you gotta just take what you get. And so I do get pretty aggressive. Like, I like to show up and spend at least a full day scouting. And what that includes typically is I'll have, a dozen OnX places marked on the map, and typically I'll go and check those out. I like to check out access. I like to see, the parking lots. I like to kind of look for weird access. So one of a story I like to tell that I've used in several articles and on a lot of podcasts is I found this spot one time that there was a bridge, like an overpass on the interstate, and then there was a parking lot close to that bridge, but nobody would go and park in the park. Everybody would like park and then go, let's just say north. I'm just saying it. But if you went to the south, what you would have found is this weird underpass, and you could have gone under the river and accessed a little piece of property that was hard to get to from any other way. So creative access. Most people just didn't think about doing that. They didn't think about walking down the cutover through the interstate and then walking under the bridge, So stuff like that. Look for creative ways, or if you can knock on a door and maybe get permission to a backside of public land that's really hard to access from public access. Maybe it's 4 or 5 miles to get back there if you had to walk, but you could knock on one door and maybe just get access to use their land for walking only, not even hunting. Just say, hey, can I walk through your backyard and get here? A lot of times if you're persistent, you can get that access. So that's what I do a lot of in the beginning, is I'm scouting access and then looking for creative things to maybe put myself in a situation that other guys wouldn't think of. So that I've had really good success doing that. And I don't like to necessarily go deep into scouting. I like to scout the edges, and I like to scout places where it would be, it wouldn't necessarily ruin my chances, or maybe places that deer probably are used to humans being, so I'm not screwing anything up. I typically don't like to dive off deep down into there. It just depends on the situation, but I typically don't like doing that. I like to hunt. I like to scout my way in and then kind of set up fresh. But it also just depends on the spot. There's just no script that you can stick to 100% of the time.
Yeah. Now, this is a question that I've heard a lot, either on my podcast or others and videos even. When you find that little new fresh sign, right? You find what you're looking for. What is your deciding factor when you're deciding that tree? Is it the cover? Is it the shooting distance to that X amount of sign or that trail? Because that's the beauty, obviously, of saddle hunting. You're not hunting a tree anymore, right? So when you find that good area, that good spot, what does then, when you look around and you're like, that is the tree I need to be in? What does that necessarily have to have for you?
So first of all, you gotta take into consideration the wind. Now, if there's a hot doe, and if you're in the stage of the rut where they're chasing hard, sometimes wind doesn't freaking matter. I mean, if you're in the right spot at the right time, I mean, every hunter has this story where the wind should have been blowing right to that deer, and they didn't even care. They just that can happen, but I'm never planning for that. I'm always planning for, okay, what happens if he comes in? How's he going to win me? That's number one. Second is access. If I have to go through, good habitat where I think I have a high potential of spooking deer, I'm going to avoid that. So I'm looking for an advantage with the wind and with access. A lot of times I like to use water. Creek bottoms or even dry creek drainages, something that shields your access to where you can get in and out bulletproof, which it's hard to find, in a week. Yeah, that's typically things that you find, in your home area where you're hunting a specific area kind of year after year, and you see how deer use the area, and you can slowly over time kind of pinpoint the right areas, and then but in a week, that's difficult, so I tend to just try to get really aggressive on spots when I'm there for a short amount of time. And, a lot of times if it's throw caution to the wind, if I find really fresh sign and I think he's going to win me, and I try to get that, maybe the slight advantage, maybe I can find a tree where I think the wind's going to quarter me away just a little bit, where I can maybe get away with it, I'll risk it. I shot a great buck in Kentucky several years ago that I ended up not finding, which that buck, it still haunts me to this day. Best I can tell is I got a single lung, and there was blood everywhere. I still don't know how we didn't find that deer. We found blood everywhere, a ton of blood. Didn't find the deer. But anyway, that was a situation where my access was bulletproof because I could come through a field to get there, but the wind was very iffy. Very iffy. It was in a bowl, so it swirled, and I had the wind blowing. I waited for a wind that kind of was blowing from the bottom kind of up the hill. So the idea was that it was kind of going to blow up the hill and then swirl behind me. And it was just off enough to where he came in and didn't win me. And that was perfect. It was perfect. It worked. A lot of times that doesn't work, but it worked this particular time in Kentucky, and I just screwed up the shot, which, man, that bothers me. I still don't know how. Man, it's giving me PTSD just thinking about it. That deer should have been dead, and I really regret that one. That was probably my second biggest bow buck ever, and that
you
one
even
really
have that. You guys posted that too.
Yeah, I got it on video, and I thought I did everything right. I did do everything right up until squeezing the trigger, but that deer was really, really tense. Like when he came in hindsight, I found some really big sign in this particular little drainage, like rubs like as big around as your thigh, like really big sign, and they were shredded, and it was fresh scrapes. I could smell the deer. I knew there was a big buck in this area. So I actually found that the first day the wind was completely wrong. Like it was blowing up the drainage. And so I needed it to switch a little bit or else I felt like I had no chance. So anyway, the next day it switched and I went in there. Even though it wasn't perfect, it was more of a crosswind. I decided to risk it. And I knew there was a really big buck in the area. Well, this is like November 5th, 6th, right? They should be, these bucks should be cranking. So I did some rattling, some grunting, and this buck came in. I'm going to say he was 140 inches, 100 mid-40s. I don't really score my deer, but it's helpful to give that number so listeners understand what kind of, it wasn't a 110-inch Florida deer like I'm used to shooting. This was a big deer, right?
Yep.
However, in hindsight, looking at the way that buck reacted, he came right to a big scrape in a cedar tree that was shredded. And this cedar tree was, as big around as your thigh. It was a big tree and it was shredded. And he came to that sign very tentatively. It all happened quickly in the moment. I didn't register, but going back and watching the footage and thinking it through, that was not the buck that made that sign. That was a subordinate buck. And he came in to see who was rattling in there and to see if, one of his little buddies had just gotten their butt whooped by the big dog. So he came in and he was sniffing that rub and sniffing the scrape, and he was very tense. So I think he was not scared of a hunter. I think he was scared of getting his butt kicked by that big buck. So in hindsight, I should have noticed that and aimed low, even though it was only like an 18-yard shot. So I don't know, but I ended up hitting a little bit higher than I would have liked, and I think because of the way he turned and ducked, I think I only got one lung. I think I missed the far side lung, and I only got the near side lung. That's the best I could tell based on the track, but that was interesting that this was a big giant buck to me, and in Georgia where I live, that would have been the dominant big boy.
Oh yeah.
But I think in that area, he was like a 3-year-old subordinate buck, and he was very, very nervous about old Big Daddy that was in there.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was interesting. The way that hunt worked out is kind of an example of how just getting really aggressive. Sometimes stuff might not be in your favor. I mean, the wind was definitely not perfect. He could have spelled me just as easily as he didn't. I just got lucky that. When he came in, the wind wasn't really blowing, and if it had swirled, he probably would have winded me. So it just kind of got lucky. Now he could have come from if he had come from a different direction, I probably would have been okay. But it's just on a week-long hunt, you don't really have the option of sitting and waiting until everything's perfect.
I love that, not sitting and waiting. And so now here's another question to build on that, and that is something that we talked about earlier, is where we said, I've learned more from my failures in life, but especially hunting. What was maybe something that you really took away from that, like when you obviously pulled out of that parking lot, left Kentucky? What was something that you're like, okay, this is something that either I know I need to do or not do next time?
I think for me, it was a major confidence boost. It was a major confidence boost, like trust your gut. There have been times where I would have, tiptoed around that area and waited, and there were years where I would have not even hunted that spot because the wind wasn't right. I would have said, I don't want to screw it up. But I learned after that hunt, trust your gut and get aggressive. Like if there's a big buck in there and that he's there recently because of the sign that you're seeing, like don't discount fresh sign. If there is fresh big sign and enough of it to make you think that it wasn't just a one-time deal, like sometimes you go and you find a scrape on a one scrape on a ridge top that could be he just was chasing a doe, and that could be a one-off. But if you find a spot that is tore up with sign, and it looks like there's historical sign, so it's a spot that you think that they're in now. Hunt it. Like, maybe not if everything is totally wrong. Maybe don't hunt it that day, or maybe you do if it's right. That's another thing. Like, that's part of the reason why I love hunting with ultralight gear, because I can carry that stuff in with me, and if I find it right now, like, I can hunt it right now.
Go.
I don't have to come back and prep a tree and do a bunch of trimming to get my big tree stand in there, or maybe there's a spot where a climber won't, because the trees are gnarly and a bunch of branches, like you can't even get a climber in there. That's part of the reason why I like saddle hunting so much, is I can just dip back to the truck if I don't have it with me and just throw it on and go. Like, sometimes hunting it right now is the best. But if it's totally wrong, trust your gut. If you think the wind is going to really screw you, come back and hunt it later.
Yeah.
And I'll pivot to back to that North Dakota hunt. It was public land where I killed that really nice buck on public land. First time I'd ever been to this area. Another thing that I learned on that hunt is don't overthink stuff. Okay, so in that particular hunt, I had planned on, Carl was filming me, and you can watch both of these hunts on the Tethrd channel, by the way. This
absolutely.
North Dakota hunt and the Kentucky hunt. You can watch them both and see how it all played out if you want. But that North Dakota hunt, Carl had already tagged out. He had shot a buck like the first or second day. So Carl was actually filming for me. And we had picked a spot that was about a mile back on this piece of public. We were going to cross a river, and it looked really good. It was hard to access. It looked like, there's a lot of thick bedding cover. It looked really, really good on a map. We'd never been there before, so that was our plan, to scout our way back, and we had a couple of pins right there that we were going to set up in. Well, we get there, and we park. This is another thing about that creative access. So I parked in a spot that wasn't associated with the public land. I didn't park in one of the parking spots. I parked in an area that had a weird access through a piece of private land that was not marked as no hunting. So in North Dakota, you're allowed to access that land. So that's what I did. I parked in a weird spot that nobody else would park, and then I went through the farmer's lane. I didn't go through his crops or anything, but I walked down his lane, and it wasn't his house. It was just a farming field. So I walked the edge, and when I got to the border of the public and the private, it was literally this giant silage pile of corn. It was on private land, and I was not hunting it. I think that might even be legal in North Dakota. I can't remember, but it wasn't on the public land. It was on the private land, and it was just where he had been dumping all his grain and silage pile is what it was, and it was just covered up with deer. There was like beds in the corn, and there was poop in the corn. And so me and Carl, we walked past. We were like, "Oh, that's interesting. There's a lot of deer using this area." So we walked past it, and then we went. I think I stopped, and I was like, "Carl, I know this is like, you can see the truck. It's like right there." I said, "But should we just hunt right here, like right on the public land?" And he was like, "Oh, maybe we should," because there was rubs and deer. It was like deer heaven, where they were just coming and eating on the edge of this field. I was like, man, this seems stupid, but, so anyway, don't overthink it, right? So we scrapped our plans. We walked 30 yards into the public and found a tree. We climbed the tree. I could see my truck I was probably 75 yards from my truck. It was stupid. Like, it doesn't make sense, but we had all this food that just made sense. Yep. So we hunted right there. We saw 7 different bucks that came out. We saw 3 bucks that were big, like, 3-year-old bucks and bigger. And one of them, the biggest one, finally, he came and gave me a great shot. I shot him right in the throat. He was kind of like quartering hard to me.
Yep.
He was quartering really hard to me, which I have killed 4 bucks with that shot. That hard quarter two or face on shot
was like that too, right?
I shot one in Kansas. I shot one in Missouri. I shot one in Indiana, and I shot that one in North Dakota, facing straight on, essentially. And I just put it right here. And those deer don't run more than 30 yards. They are dead quick. But anyway, that was an example of don't overthink it. I mean, we found all this food, all this fresh sign, and instead of sticking to our plan, we called an audible and hunted 30 yards from the truck, but it was the right call based on that sign. So, get aggressive, but also don't overthink it, man. If you see sign and it looks fresh and hot, hunt it.
Get on it.
And,
Get on it.
Don't go in there and screw it all up and walk around and just get to the first tree that gives you a good shooting opportunity that breaks up your outline. I mean, don't overthink it. A lot of times I think that we give these deer too much credit, and we think they're smarter than they are. So there you go. There's two examples for me on public land. Don't overthink it and get aggressive.
I love that. And that's a perfect transition to kind of towards the end of this podcast where I want to discuss some things because, it is July. We are getting ready for hunting season. You and I were both, I could probably say we're gear nerds, right? We love that type of stuff. Tethrd just released not only one product, not two products, but three new products this past July 1st, and that is obviously the lockdown saddle, the King Comfort, and then the fold and go, as well as the Scorpion grappling hook. Those are three new products that you have coming, or are out right now. I guess talk a little bit about, who is this lockdown saddle designed for? Because I mean, you have the Phantom, right? The Phantom, I believe, is. I remember when I first saw the lockdown, I was like, man, I just love my Phantom, right? Like that is such a great freaking saddle. And then knowing my style of hunting, I do sit more than I lean. And I just like being close to the tree. I just like the way I could pivot around using my knees and just the way my personal setup. And then I got in the lockdown and I was like, oh shit, in a good way, dang, this sucker is so comfortable, and just the way seeing how that yoke system goes, and I'm stealing the thunder here, but who is this lockdown saddle really designed for, or go with for that?
Man, it's a really good saddle. It's very, very comfortable. I had the same experience, 2 years ago when we had the first prototype, when Carl brought out the first prototype. It was quite a bit different than it is now, but the nuts and bolts were the same. When we first sat in, I was like, man, this is really comfortable. I never found the Phantom to be uncomfortable. I have hunted for years out of the Phantom. I've done several daylight to dark sits, a lot of 6-hour sits, a lot of 5 a.m. to noons. So a lot of long sits, and I was never uncomfortable. So this idea of it being a more comfortable saddle, it is. But I just go back and forth because at heart I'm a minimalist. I like to take the least amount of stuff in as possible, and it's a bigger, bulkier. Not that it's bulky, but compared to the Phantom, which was like slim and super minimalist, like it pretty much everything's bulkier than that, right? So it's a bulkier, larger, more feature packed saddle. So for the guy that like that yoke system, it's another thing. I never had a problem with the Phantom coming off my waist, never. And I've hunted in 1,000 states with. Oh, that's a lie. I've hunted in a lot of places in a lot of different temperature ranges with the saddle, with the Phantom, and I never had an issue with it coming off. But a lot of guys do. A lot of people say that it likes to ride down. So, we came out with the yoke system, which solves that problem. My favorite thing about the lockdown is the pockets. Okay. Those pockets with the IFS, Carl called it the internal frame structure, the IFS, that is awesome. And to me, that's worth upgrading to the lockdown just because of that. You can really get in and out of those pockets with one hand. So like with the Phantom, like with our traditional cis haulers, the pockets that go on the outside on your hips on the Phantom saddle, it takes two hands, right? So you got to kind of contort and reach over and get. Not a big deal. I've done it for years, but the lockdown does make it easier. So you can just get in and out of those with one hand. And I like the zippers. They're quiet. They work well. There's a ton of storage. I think for a lot of early and mid-season hunts, I don't even think you'd need a pack. Like if you're not self-filming, so if you're not carrying a bulky camera with a camera arm and stuff like that, I think that 90% of guys can ditch the pack altogether with the way that we design those pockets with how much volume there is. And I think even some minimalists with small cameras and small like stuff that they're doing at Fourth Arrow with their really small, like their satellite arm, that fits in one of the pockets on the lockdown. So I think for an early season guy that where you're not having to carry bulky layers, I think you can ditch a pack altogether, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So, and it's comfortable, man. You just can't deny that it's really, really comfortable. So if you're not a minimalist and you don't mind carrying a little bit more weight, I mean, it's still not anywhere close to a tree stand. I mean, the lockdown is like 3.5 pounds, I think, all in. So if you don't mind carrying a little bit more weight and bulk, as far as saddle hunting goes, it's still the most minimalist thing ever. It's not any bulkier than a safety harness for your tree stand.
Right.
If you don't mind that, get the lockdown. It's awesome. It's so comfortable. The pockets are amazing. The yoke is awesome. Everything that we did in that thing is just a home run. If you're more of a minimalist, you don't do a lot of long sits. You know, let's say most of your sits are, 4 hours or under, and you don't like to carry a lot of stuff, get the Phantom. That's
Yep.
what I would say. It's very, the Phantom is the biggest selling saddle of all time. In history, no saddle has sold more than the Phantom, and there's a reason for that because it's just awesome. So there you go. I hope I made that as clear as mud.
Yeah. I like that.
If comfort matters to you more than anything, get the lockdown. It is way, way, way comfortable. If minimalism and lightweight matters more than anything, get the Phantom.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I've been telling my friends. I said, could I go without having a lockdown 100%, but knowing my style and like later on. And that, I agree with you. I've never been uncomfortable in my Phantom. So like that was also like the hard part. It's like I've never been uncomfortable, so it's not like I need to do that. I'm with you though. I like the pocket sides, and there are times where I know I take my camera, but then there are times when the season hits, I'm like, I'm not taking my camera today. And you know what I mean? So there's pros and there's cons of why, for sure. And don't get me wrong, I know I'll end up having one. Like I'll for sure end up using one, no doubt about it. But I think for someone that is also maybe trying saddle hunting for the first time, I think if, like you said, comfort, stability, just all that different types of things, I think the lockdown offers a lot more than the Phantom does to that person, maybe a little bit too. Like you said, the yoke system. And I know obviously you can use our suspenders and all that type of stuff, but that's the beauty of it. Like, it's a one-stop shop, so you could pick whatever that individual really wants. There's an option for you. So I think it's always being innovative, pushing the needle a little bit, and I think you guys continue to do that.
Thanks, man. And you're part of it, so we're all in this together. But I almost get a little upset I guess I'm upset with myself because I'm in charge of the marketing and sales, and I'm the one that coined it the king of comfort. But it irritates me a little bit because it almost says that means that the Phantom was uncomfortable. And I know we just kind of both hit on this, that's not true. The Phantom is incredibly comfortable. I've been hunting with the Phantom since 2018 or no, 2019. 2019 was the first prototype year of the Phantom. So I switched out of the Mantis in 2019. So I've been hunting 19, 20, 21, 22, last year I messed around with prototypes of the lockdown. So for 3 years I hunted from the Phantom. Never had issues with comfort. Matter of fact, I like telling this story too. So the very first hunt I ever hunted with the Phantom was a prototype in 2019. And it was I sat from daylight to dark in Montana on a water hole trying to shoot a bow, trying to be the first guy to shoot an elk with a bow. So very first hunt out of Phantom, daylight to dark, no issues, right? I mean, that's a long hunt in the long summer days of September. I guess technically maybe that's fall, but still, days are long, and I sat there all day with no issues. I mean, yeah, sure, you have to rotate positions, and every hour or so I would stand up and, turn around on the platform and put my back against the tree to just give my body a little break. But you got to do that in a tree stand too.
Tree stand
I mean,
anyway.
you can't sit in a tree stand all day without moving. Like, you've got to move around to stay comfortable.
Same thing on the ground. If
Same
you're
thing
hunting
on the
from the
ground.
ground. Yeah. You have
Yeah,
to
I
move.
mean, when I'm turkey hunting, I can only sit there for about 45 minutes or so, an hour, before I've got to shift around because I start getting really uncomfortable. So, anyway, not to beat a dead horse, but the Phantom is not uncomfortable. It's just that the lockdown takes it to the next level. I mean, it is just like a lazy boy up in the tree. It's very, very comfortable.
And then the fold and go, which is, I think, a really cool bow arm. I mean, I don't want to say bow arm or bow hanger because it's really just any equipment hanger. I mean, you could hang anything off of it. I'm excited. What I'm really excited for, and something that I found really helpful is with my his strap, is during rifle season, whether I'm on if I'm a postman during if people are doing a drive towards me, I put my his strap up around because it gets my gear off the ground, one, but then two, having some sort, and now the fold and goes, if my gun is hanging up, I could just boom, fold it right over. And if it needs to go to the other side, I'm able to do that. It offers a little bit more stability than just pressing it up against a tree. Me personally, that's what I've found. And obviously last year I didn't run one as a prototype or anything like that. So I was using a different style bow hanger, and I had two different ones on each side. But now having that option of both of them folding, the way they're designed, I don't know. It's a really cool piece. Again, I transitioned to the quick draw for archery season. I think that it's so hard. But I still might have my fold and go on me just for the sole fact of, I'm going to toy around with where I want my backpack, right? Like where will I have it? Normally, that's the beauty of our his strap too. I know this is going to sound like a big gear thing, but this is me walking through my complete system. But when that long tag comes out on my his strap, there's a loop on. Like, what is it? Every inch that we have one? Is that how far
it's
apart?
inch and a half, I think.
Yeah, so 1.5 inches, there's not a section where you cannot not hang something from, right? It doesn't matter. You're not limited. So having that long tag in, that's usually where I would have my backpack. But now if it's up where the top part is, it's going to, I think, I'm going to mess around with. I think I'm going to like that a little bit better rather than it being closer to my knees, the lower part. So I'm going to mess around with that. But the fold and go is a really cool piece. It's quiet, and you still have the option to put stealth strip onto it to begin with. So I'm really excited about having that new little piece of gear in the toolbox.
Yeah, the fold and go is sweet, man. And I'm going to echo what you said about rifle season. I think what I'm going to do this year is any rifle hunts, I'm going to take two fold and goes, one on the left and one on the right. So that way I can also use it as a rifle rest, because you can put that his strap on at the right height to where you can lay your rifle right across that his strap and have a nice little mount, and put one on both sides. That way you're good no matter what. Now, and here's another benefit of the lockdown. Those pockets are so big, and you can put so much gear in there. The fold and go is really lightweight, so you could just throw one in your lockdown hauler, and you have it. And if you want it, use it, and if not, don't. That's a right. You're not going to pay a big weight penalty for that. Now, the his strap, in my opinion, is one of the best things we've ever made. I think that is the best gear hanger on the planet. We make it really long.
I'm doing a shameless plug right now, Greg. Go to the Antler Up podcast YouTube. That was my latest video. Is the most underrated piece of hunting gear that you could own, and it doesn't matter if you're a saddle hunter, tree stand hunter, a ground hunter. No matter if you are just a hunter, this piece of gear you should own.
I completely agree. Completely agree, man. And that tail, like you were talking about with your pack, this is a tip that might help you. So, whenever you've got that thing locked down and you've got that tail, so one of the tricks that I use is I'll take that tail and I'll run it to wherever I want to put my pack, and then I'll run it through from the top down on one of the loops in the exact location so I can easily move my pack. Like if I want my pack to be on the back side of the tree, but I don't want it up high, I want it down low, I'll run that long 6-foot tail that's left over and drop it down through one of the loops on the back side of the tree, and then I can still manage the height as well. The other thing that I've done with that his strap is in certain trees, I've done it where I've taken that tail, I've locked it on so my bow's hanging, on the his strap, and maybe my grunt tube or whatever's in front of me or my binos or whatever. Then I'll take that tail and I'll run it to another limb or another trunk and wrap it around and lock it off so I can move my pack to a different tree trunk altogether. You can use that tail. Typically, you're going to have, 6 to 8 foot of tail left on that thing, and you can do that. You can do 100 different things with that tail, and I've done it a lot. I think the his strap, I'm going to completely agree with you and say that is a very underrated piece of gear. And when you marry that with the quick draw bow hook, I know I sell it, and I know that it's kind of my design, so I'm partial to it, but I don't think I'll stick to saddle hunting because you're facing the tree. A little different for tree stands because you wouldn't want your bow behind you. But if you're a saddle hunter, I don't think there is a better bow hanging, gear hanging system on the planet than that. That little quick draw hook that drops right down into one of the his strap slots, it's easy, it's bulletproof, it's no nonsense, you can't screw it up, it lives on your bow so you don't have to find it. It's just perfect. I can't really think of a way that could be improved upon that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, shameless
yeah.
plug for Tethrd Gear and Antler Up YouTube channel.
Yeah. And then the Scorpion, just kind of that little grappling hook. It's really cool to hear and see people, how fired up they are about this little thing. Like, I remember when I first saw it, I'm thinking to myself, man, yeah, I remember when I dropped this, and that would have been really cool. But just hearing different people's stories and seeing, they're like, man, if I would have had this, and it's crazy. So that's another really cool, innovative, small innovative design that we thought we didn't need. We knew we wanted something, but we didn't know we needed it.
One of the things that I like about the Scorpion, again, we do everything we do, we think about weight and packability. So, it folds flat, which is really cool for a treble hook style gear, a grappling hook. Most of the times they're big, but this one folds flat and it fits. It weighs like 1.5 ounces. Like, there's nothing to it. Yep. One of my favorite ways to use it is I keep it in my pack at all times. Doesn't mean I use it on every hunt, but every now and again, before the Scorpion, last year was the first year I had the Scorpion hook, the prototype, I would sometimes avoid trees, climbing trees that had a lot of limbs, because I knew that the way I hauled my bow up was I leave it on the ground and I attach it to my hip, and then when I get up, I just pull it up. Well, if you're going over and around limbs, now you're screwed. You can't get your bow up. So in situations like that, I will just, pick my tree or pick my spot where I'm going to be on the tree, leave the bow right under that spot. Then once you're up there, you drop the Scorpion hook and just fish it up. St. Carl taught me that. So again, it can live in your pack, and you never know what you might need it for. You drop. Who hasn't dropped the glove?
Yep.
When you take it off to do something with your phone and you drop it, or you drop your hat, or you drop your grunt call, everybody's done it. Now you can fish that thing up without having to climb back down. And I don't know how many times I've needed an extra 2 feet to get to a limb that I couldn't reach, and now you can just toss that grappling hook over the limb, pull it down, tie it around, or bend it behind another branch to make yourself a shooting lane. Like, there's 1,000 things you could do with that Scorpion hook that don't have to do with gear. So it's a great little thing. It doesn't weigh anything. It can just live in your pack or on your hip, and it's like better to need and not have, or better to have and not need than to need and not have, right? So you get that thing and it just lives in your pack, and then when you need it, and if you don't, you're not carrying an extra 5 pounds of weight. You're just carrying an ounce or so more. So it's a pretty cool deal.
That is a really cool deal. So now North Dakota is one of the first things coming up. What is your saddle setup? Are you going your Phantom still, or are you going lockdown?
So I don't know. For that hunt, I'm not taking a camera guy. I'm going to self film everything. So I might use the Phantom on that one. Um, I'll have both with me in North Dakota, so I might just switch them out. I'm fortunate. I know a guy that can get me all the stuff that I need for saddle hunting, so I can take multiple setups with me. So I might have both, but probably the Phantom. Probably the Phantom I'll use in North Dakota. And then in Illinois, I'll probably take the Lockdown because that's going to be longer sits. Those will probably be either all day sits or at least till noon, like lunchtime sits. So I'll probably bring the Lockdown for that one. And then I'll just probably flip back and forth. Plus, we've got another saddle that we're prototyping this fall. Yeah, which is pretty exciting. So I'll be sitting in that one some this year too, getting the final feels. Maybe you should sit in it too in September when you come with me to North Dakota.
That's good. I like it. Well, that's a perfect way to end out, Greg. Man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you have ever done for me and continue to do for the hunting community as well. It's awesome. Like I said, it dates prior to us even meeting, and I've learned a crap ton from you. So it's an honor to have you on and friendship and stuff like that. So where could people obviously tethrdnation.com, it's plugged on every single one of my episodes, but as far as maybe other things from old videos from you or anything along those lines, where can people find that and learn more about what, all the things that you've done?
I always like to point people to my YouTube channel, G2 Outdoors. I don't post on it anymore. It's been dormant for a few years, but I have a ton of content from way back in the day, from when I was, we're talking almost 10 years ago, from when I was doing, building these saddles in my garage and kind of DIYing equipment. But there's still a lot of really good, relevant stuff on there. Even if you're not a DIY guy, if you like to, just buy off the shelf stuff, there's some really cool little tips and tricks, just stuff I learned over the years from figuring this stuff out. You can watch a lot of hunts, a lot of these out-of-state hunts. You can watch a lot, like I think the most watched video on my channel is that DIY truck build. Yeah. So I catalog that. So if you want to see a quick, easy way to build a camper setup for the back of your truck bed, go watch that. I got just a lot of stuff, so G2 Outdoors for like kind of DIY hunting stuff, and then if you want the saddle hunting gear, Tethrd, wherever, pretty much Tethrd Nation everywhere. You nailed that one. So yeah, man, that's where all my stuff lives. Thanks for having me on. It's always awesome to spend some time chatting with you, Jeremy. And I don't know when the next time I see you face to face. I don't think it'll be until the first week of September. Yeah.
I like it, Greg. It's a pleasure. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Go check out G2 Outdoors and obviously what Tethrd Nation's all doing. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next week. Antler up. Awesome, Greg. Man, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it.